Hello guys, welcome back to my lessons. Today we are doing genetics and we'll be focusing on the pedigree diagram. As you know that genetics has a lot of keywords, but today we're going to focus on only the keywords that are going to help us answer the questions under the pedigree diagram. I know most of you find this topic difficult, but I'll try to explain as simple as possible. So now let's look at the first keyword, which is phenotype. Phenotype is an individual observable traits such as height, eye color, and blood type, right? So what you can see, for an example, being tall, having big eyes, having long hair, having long arms, etc. That is the phenotype of a person, what you can actually see. I know you cannot see blood type, but if they test them, you will know that they are type C. So that is also a phenotype, right? So phenotype is what you can actually see most of the time. So let's talk about an allele. An allele is a variation of the same sequence of nucleotides at the same place on a long DNA molecule, right? That's for your biological term. But in simple terms, in pedigree, most of the time, when we use the allele, alleles are just these letters. It can be capital letter, it can be small letter. Those are the alleles, but that allele represent a certain characteristic. What am I talking about when I say characteristic? I'm talking about being tall. We can see that the T as an allele represents being tall. So an allele it's a letter that represents a certain phenotype, right? For L can represent light skin. The examiner will tell you in the statement that L is for a certain characteristic, maybe for light-skinned. Now let's move on to genotype. Genotype is an individual's collection of genes. The term can also refer to two alleles inherited for a particular gene. So genotype, in simple terms, it's just two letters combined together, two alleles combined together. So that is a genotype, right? So a genotype, don't write this in your books, but in my own explanation, maybe that would help you understand this better. A genotype is just a scientific way of writing a certain phenotype, right? For tall, I can write TT, right? That is a scientific way of writing tall. That's just a scientific way of writing these characteristics that we're talking about. So when you see two letters in pedigree, that's a genotype, right? So now a genotype, it's combination of two alleles, right? The two alleles, we have a dominant allele and we have a recessive allele. A dominant allele is a variation of a gene that will produce a certain phenotype even in the presence of other alleles. So in simple terms, a dominant allele is just these capital letters. These capital letters, these alleles that are capital letters, those are dominant alleles, but we'll explain further. Recessive allele is a variety of gene code that does not create a phenotype if a dominant allele is present. That's also for your biological term, but recessive alleles are just these small letters, right? So now let's move on to types of genotypes that we can have. So now we're going to talk about the characteristic of being tall. So if you're talking about a certain characteristic, let's say you're talking about being tall, in one question, you have also to talk about being short. So let's say we're talking about having a disease, hemophilia. We will also have to talk about not having hemophilia. So now, what do I mean by that? For tall, a person who is tall, when we write tall in scientific terms, we can say that the person, if the examiner told us that tall is represented by the dominant allele T. Why am I saying dominant? Capital letter, as you can see there. So the tall is going to be capital letter TT, right? For someone that is short, if you write the one T, that's an allele, that's not a genotype of a person. So for short, small letter T, small letter T. Why for short are we not writing S? Because short is a recessive over tall, and the tall is dominant over short, right? So that's just how we write it. We take the first letter of the dominant phenotype or the dominant allele. So now we can also have someone who is tall, but they have the genotype which is capital letter T and a small letter t. Listen to me very well. So the capital letter T and a small letter t, the phenotype of this person is going to be tall. Why not short? Because that T is recessive, it's not dominant. So the dominant T, which is the capital letter T, it overrides the what? The recessive allele. Hence, the phenotype of this person is tall. It's not short. So I want us to look at this question. The question says that moya moya is a disorder caused by a dominant allele R. So they already told us that if you have moya moya, you must have the dominant allele, which is R, right? So I told you when we talk about being tall, we also have to talk about being short. So now when we talk about having moya moya, we must also talk about not having moya moya. So the disorder damages the arteries supplying blood to the brain. That's not that important. Now let's look at the pedigree diagram below, which shows the inheritance of moya moya in a family. So in a pedigree diagram, when they give you a pedigree diagram, they're going to ask you questions like how many males are there, how many females are there. So always look at the key first. You will notice that most of the time the squares are the males, the circles are the females. If they haven't given you the key, look at the statement. If the statement has not said anything about males and females, always know that the squares are the males, the circles are the females. So most of the time the affected ones will be shaded black, and then the unaffected ones will be shaded white, right? So if you don't have moya moya, right, it means that you have what? Small letter R, right? But the two small letter R's, because if you have a big letter R and a small letter R, the small letter R still doesn't count. Why? Because it's recessive, and that big R overrided it, and you still have the phenotype of what? Of having moya moya. But here we can say that it's being affected. The phenotype, we can say it's being affected, right? So how many males are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 males. How many females are there? 2, 4, 6. We have 6 females. Another question that they can ask you is the generations. How many generations are represented in the diagram? How do you count generations? You look at the line of the people born at the same time. First line we have A and B, that's the first generation. Second line we have C, D, E, F, they are born at the same time, second generation. Third generation, G, H, I, J, that is the third generation, right? So we have 3 generations represented in this diagram. So now when you get a pedigree, what I would suggest you do first, you look at the statement, you read it. Moya moya is a disorder caused by a dominant allele R. Write down the possible genotypes. Most of the time we only have 3 genotypes, possible genotypes. So the first genotype is going to be capital letter RR, that can come out of here. The second genotype is small letter RR for people who don't have moya moya. And then big R's are for those who have moya moya. And then another one that I told you that we can have a genotype is capital letter R and small letter r. But you know that capital letter R and capital letter R, small letter r, those people will have the same phenotype. Why? Because the other one, the one that is in heterozygous condition, which is capital letter R and small letter r, the R is overridden. The small letter r is overridden by the dominant R. So now let me tell you about homozygous and heterozygous before we move on. So capital letter RR, that is homozygous dominant. So it just means that we have 2 copies of dominant alleles for a gene. So it's just 2 capital letters. For small letter RR, it's homozygous recessive. Homozygous recessive means having 2 copies of the same recessive allele for a gene. right? So we have heterozygous. Heterozygous is just having two, you're having dominant and recessive. Always note that dominant overrides the recessive, right? Since they said here that it is caused by dominant allele R, other diseases, they can say, they can come and say hemophilia is a disorder caused by a recessive allele R, which will be small letter then, a recessive allele R. So it means that if you have those two R's that are small, now you are affected, no longer unaffected. And then what will happen to the one who is now in heterozygous condition? Are they going to be affected or not if the disease is caused by a recessive allele, which is the small letter? That person is going to be unaffected. Why? Because the big R protected them. It overrided the recessive allele that has the disorder, and then they end up not being affected. Now let's move on to this our pedigree diagram here, right? Let's look at man A, right? Man A is his genotype. His phenotype first is affected, right? Genotype, is it capital letter RR, small letter RR, or capital letter R, small letter R? So do you see the importance of now writing these possible genotypes in the beginning? It helps you to choose from the three. You just have to choose from the three throughout the question. So this man could be the big two R's because he's affected, or he can be the heterozygous, capital letter R and small letter R. But which one is he? How do we find that out? We look at his children. So now let's say let's take capital letter RR first. Before we do that, since we're going to cross, before we can find out if he's capital letter RR or small letter RR, let's look at the wife. The wife is unaffected. Unaffected means now the wife, obviously, it's small letter RR, right? So it means that now you're going to take the small letter RR and put it to all the people that are unaffected in this pedigree. D unaffected RR, G unaffected genotype RR, F genotype small RR, H the RR which is not capitalized, right? So since we know that the woman is small letter RR, but the man, we're not sure whether it's capital letter RR or the heterozygous condition. So now how do we find it out? Now look at this example. So, but this side I was making example with short and tall. So if a person is tall, right, but and has the genotype of capital letter TT, and marries someone with capital letter TT genotype again, they're both tall and they're homozygous tall, both of them. When they are crossed, their kids will all be tall. Why? Because this is how we cross. We take the first T on the left, and then we combine it with the first T, the side on the side on the genotype. We put them together. We take the first T again. We combine it with the last T, this side. We put them together. We take the second T now. We combine it with the first T on the side. Combine together. Take the second T again. Combine it with the last T, the side. Those are their kids. So whenever they're having a kid, their kid will just pick one genotype there. I don't know how it happens, but yeah, they just pick one genotype there, and then that's it. Now let's go to the second parents. Second parent is homozygous tall, the other one heterozygous tall. These are their possible kids. What happened here? How did I multiply? I took the first T this side on the homozygous, combined with the first T this side on the heterozygous, combined together. They gave me capital letter TT. I took the first T again, combined it with the small t this side together, and then we take the second capital letter T, combine it with the first T this side, put together TT, capital letters. We take the second capital letter T, combine it with the small letter t. The kid will just pick from there what they want to be when they are born. And then we have the last one. They are both heterozygous. As you can see that two heterozygous mothers and father. mother and father, will end up having a kid that is short. The other kids are tall, others are heterozygous, the other one is homozygous, but the other one is going to be short. Also this side, this man, if we cross him, if we cross the capital letter RR with the small letter RR, we will end up having heterozygous moya people, which are unaffected. So let's look at his kids. Are they all unaffected? D and E, those are their kids. Are they all unaffected? No, we find E is affected. So it means this man is not capital letter RR, but is heterozygous, capital letter R, small letter r. So now we found his genotype. That's how we find genotype. And then obviously the ones who are black shaded, they will have two possible genotypes. So if they ask you the genotype of J, right? J is shaded, affected. You don't know whether he is capital letter RR or capital letter R, small letter r. They might want their genotypes, and the marks are 2. Just know that you have to write 2 of them. If it happens you cannot find which one is the right one, write 2 of them, because you'll find out that the marks are 2 marks. But if it's 1 mark, then you will have to find the correct one. Now, how to find the correct one of J? You look at the parents. If maybe you have already found the genotypes of the parents, and you go through the same process of multiplying. You check if those parents, is there possibility of them having a child who is capital letter RR. If not, then it means J would be capital letter R, small letter r. However, now let's look at the questions. How many generations are represented in the diagram? So we have 3 generations. Give the letters of unaffected males. Give the letters of unaffected males. The letters of unaffected males, unaffected people here are the ones that are shaded white. It's H. H is an affected male. Genotype of individual A. We have already talked about this, and we found that this man is capital letter R, small letter r, which is heterozygous. So you just write capital letter R, small letter r. Letters of individuals not biologically related to A and B. Letters of individuals not biologically related to A and B. So I haven't actually solved this one, but I will in the next lesson. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you understand. I'm going to solve many questions under this topic, and I will try to